G'day, people of the world. I'm going to read you an article. It is titled Obama and the Bank Protection Racket. It is by Glenn Ford. Okay, quote, Wall Street knows with great intimacy that it is perched on the lip of the abyss, and that the next crash can come from any number of directions, that all its faults are active and all its contradictions acute. Quote, Wall Street's protectors in the Obama administration understand this too. Quote, the U.S. Justice Department's job, as Eric Holder sees it, is to immunize the criminals from prison time and then fine their companies to preserve the illusion of justice. However, when the next crash comes, a state of emergency will follow. Quote, the fascist cat has been out of the bag from the moment in September 2008 when Treasury Henry Secretary Paulson issued not-so-veiled threats of martial law. If you don't pass this bailout bill, what he said was that tomorrow or so martial law would be instilled. So basically saying if we don't pay off the banks, want to rule us, have martial law. Wake the fuck up. Anyway, many of the people that read the magazine and other left publications believe that President Obama's preventive detention legislation, his recent executive order authorizing the federal takeover of all U.S. communications media in an emergency, and the rest of the ever-growing police-state infrastructure are primarily designed to silence domestic opposition to U.S. war policies or to facilitate the suppression of urban black and brown rebellions. From an historical perspective, our readers are certainly correct. Black people and anti-war folk have been viewed as the topic domestic national security threats for the past 60 years. However, times change, and the powers that be are motivated by their own hierarchy of fears. The nightmare that most terrifies the finance capitalists who rule this country is not populated by aging black revolutionaries and peaceniks, but by masses of ordinary, meaning mostly white Americans in open revolt against the banks. Wall Street knows this. Great intimacy, that it is perched on the lip of the abyss, and that the next crash can come from any number of directions, that all its faults are active and all its contradictions acute. Global capital and its servants in government are haunted by the memory of their own near-death experience. The meltdown 4 years ago, when they were compelled by cascading events to share with the public the specter of financial Armageddon. The fascist cat has been out of the bag from the moment in September 2008. I'll repeat again. When Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson issued the not-so-veiled threat of martial law, the banksters must only be allowed to continue looting and rigging the system, since they cannot survive otherwise. Yep, they told everybody that they would do martial law if Congress did not accede to the bankers' demands for a blank check. And billions, billions, trillions of dollars have been printed ever since, backed by nothing other than paper. Fucking paper. Fucking taking my trees. Once revealed, the repulsive corpus of depraved capital is seared into the public brain indelibly. 3 Septembers after the meltdown, it took only a few amateurish but determined white kids and some cooperative New York City cops with mace to refocus revulsion against Wall Street. Even as both corporate parties roared, austerity! In unison, how easy it was to return the conversation to the central contradiction, that the system is decayed, infinitely corrupt, a cancer on the society, run for the benefit of a tiny minority. Even overt white racists get it, although their black hate as always prevents them from properly acting upon that knowledge. That's called divide and conquer, by the way. Capitalism's irreversible nakedness means permanent crisis for those whose job it is to protect Wall Street. The beast survives only by ever more blatant theft and manipulation. Whatever corporate political party is in charge must somehow assure that the public the rule of law still exists, while protecting their Wall Street masters. Ultimately, this becomes impossible, since the task requires more than a mere impunity for the criminals. Banksters must also be allowed to continue looting and rigging the system, since they cannot otherwise survive. It is a hell of a job, but somebody like Attorney General Eric Holder and his Justice Department has to do it. Only in this context do Holder's grants of immunity to Barclays Bank, British and UBS, Swiss, and Lieber scandal make sense. Immunities are traditionally granted to smaller fry in order to indict bigger fish, but all 16 of the banks potentially involved in are huge, too big to fail, and Barclays beat UBS to the punch in admitting wrongdoing and consenting to be fined $450 million. UBS, as New York Times financial columnist James B. Stewart reports, quote, is in league of its own given track record for scandals, quote, unquote, having been fined over $1 billion by the feds in recent years. The bank was also forced to reimburse $22.7 billion defrauded from the customers in a toxic securities scheme. If UBS gets immunity, then so will U.S. mega banks, J.P. Morgan, Chase, and Citigroup. One cannot imagine a persecution of President Obama's friend Robert Wolf, the ongoing chairman of UBS's American operations, whose vacation, golfs, and playing basketball with the president has bundled $500,000 toward his re-election campaign. The U.S. Justice Department's job, as Eric Holder sees it, is to immunize the criminals from prison time, and then find their companies to preserve the illusion of justice, as we discussed in these pages 2 weeks ago. Holder successfully contained the national bankster robo-signing scandal earlier this week by browbeating state attorney generals into dropping their suits in investigations and forcing an affordable monetary settlement, most of which will never ever reach actual homeowners. Quote, no one would know where to start in shrinking hundreds of trillions in derivatives down to a size that was no longer a lethal threat to the real economy. Quote, Holder cannot pursue the normal prosecutorial strategy, immunizing low-level Libra fixers and collaborators in order to get indictments of the higher-ups, because his real mission is to hide the facts of the scheme, its long duration and centrality to the global capital's criminal enterprise. A successful immunity strategy requires scaring the small fry to death with threats of imprisonment, so that they will rat out their superiors and divulge detailed information on possible additional criminality. Years of Barclays Bank emails show how casually the Libra rates was manipulated by guys way below the top offices, but it is precisely that level of bankster that Wall Street's protectors and government don't want to spook. There are too many of them, and they are apt to tell too much. Instead, Holder and his British counterparts give blanket institutional immunities and extract a fine. The crimes in all variations continue as they must. Although the Libra rate has some impact on every conceivable financial transaction, it is clear that the derivatives lie at the heart of the crime. With 600 to 1,000 trillion in derivatives floating around, most of them held by too big to fail banks, the movement up or down of a basis point, 1/100%, puts billions in motion. Global banking invented derivatives to create their own speculators' economy, much larger than but acting as a great weight upon and holding as hostage the mere $75 trillion real-world economy. Well, I'd just like to mention a note on this. This speculators' economy that they talk about, so all these derivatives, that's all fake money, and it does not exist. And so, with them printing all this bullshit and creating this little fucked up economy where they're moving all this wealth around and keeping it for themselves, and we have to pay actual money, our hard-earned money as taxes for their fuck-ups, which is not really a fuck-up, it's on purpose, and they're just reestablishing the wealth somewhere else. Anyway, continue. The idea that Libra manipulation is the key to keeping free Federal Reserve money flowing to the banksters also appears sound. There are many uses for rigging the world's interest rate benchmark. It is far too late to unwind the derivatives monster, to disassemble it like a bankrupt bank. No one would know where to start in shrinking hundreds of trillions in derivatives down to a size that was no longer a lethal threat to the real economy. And no Wall Street institution would survive the transition. Thus, finance capital lives daily with the existential threats, first from its own inventions and contradictions, and second from a public that would tear them limb from limb if the people understood the true depth of Wall Street's crimes and how much danger the rich pigs have put the rest of us in. Wall Street's protectors must prepare for a state of emergency, a great imposition of silence, and the possibility of a great lockup, because the crash is coming, and they know it.